Previously on Jay Speaks.
Focus a little bit more or harp on Burnt and Brewington.
Okay.
You're a creative boutique styling agency. What makes your agency in particular unique? And please take this opportunity to talk about the services that you provide, because it's a whole array. I've recorded 9.
Oh, wow. Okay. Let me see if I can remember the 9.
I can help you.
I would say, in its most simplest form, what makes us unique is that it's a lot of lived experiences. So when you come and sit, instead of it being like a lot of paperwork or forms, which I do have because it helps me to get information, I sit the same way you're sitting with me right now. I sit with each person and I ask for the backstory. Like, how'd you get here? Like, tell me about your business. And, you know, all the things that usually make people really proud to share. And so we take into consideration all of that. And then it's like, where do you want to go? What do you want to see happen? And so when we pull that in, not that other people don't do that, but instead of it for me forcing like my services or here's what we're going to do or this, I really sit in that space because you want people to feel like they're part of that process. Even if they don't know about marketing or public relations, you want people to feel like they're part of that. So one of the things that I always tell people is you get, even if I have other team or staff to help, you still get me. You still get the layers of what I'm presenting. So it's hands-on. It's like having a doctor. I speak in metaphors, analogies, and similes here. But it's like having a doctor and you go to this doctor for say a year and you've shared and poured into this doctor and you feel like this person knows a lot of what's going on, and then you go back one day and then you get a different doctor. And then you have to start over. And then that doctor doesn't really know because they're trying to help you in that moment right then. So they don't know all the backstory. They can look at it and go, oh, you've had this happen and this happened, but they don't understand the story. They don't understand what you had to fight for to get there. So I don't pawn you off on someone else to where they're just doing the service. This is like a lifestyle here. And we want this to be something very much like the relationship that you have with someone that you feel very safe with, someone that you feel like you have a relationship with. And that's what we do. We build relationships. So yes, services come, but it's the relationships. So that's what I feel like is unique, that when you come, you become part of a family. And we really do work with you in whatever way we can, whether it's with your budget, whether it's with the time commitment, whatever it is, we work with you in that moment. And as far as services go, okay, here we go. Can I name the services? So we do public relations, marketing, very broad. It's like beer. It's like 11 million types of beer out there, but it's beer, right? So marketing to me is like beer. Do you want like a ale? Do you want like a, I don't even know beer, so I don't even know why I picked that, but it's like beer. So marketing is very broad, but we can help in any aspect of marketing. Usually the marketing that I really gravitate towards is brand voice, brand identity, brand awareness, storytelling. It is authenticity to make sure that when you have your business and how you describe your business and your brand, that when you show up, it matches. So have you ever played that card game where you flip it over and you got to find the other match? There's nothing like you flip over a fish and then there's the horse and then the next card's the goat. Well, you just want to match. You want to match when you're out and people see you because you are representative of your brand, that you match. You match the language, you match the cohesiveness, and so we help with that. We help with crisis management, which falls under PR. We can do social media management. We can do copy and content. There's editing. I'm trying to think, did I get everything? I feel like I'm leaving something out. Communications management. Product placement and influencer marketing and management. Yes. And we do other stuff too, but you know, it feels so like, I don't know, like almost a little ego driven when you're like, oh, we do more, but we can. Like we meet you where you are. So.
And it's to my understanding that you're focused on the marginalized community?
Yes, so marginalized is so broad now. So marginalized could be anything from someone that is starting out ageism, like someone that's 50 plus and starting their business. Things have changed for a lot of people, including social media or the way that people can access their community. So they come in at a learning curve. Like if you're not really strong in technology and computers, you're gonna fail at social media, right? Like hands down. So there's that group. I do typically work with what I call invisible communities. So invisible communities, that's a term, I'm not saying I came up with it, but it's a term that I use that reflects that you can be in one community. So I can be, a woman, or I can be, I was born in Durham, so I could be like a Durham or Raleigh native and still be in a broad community while still being part of a smaller subset of a community. So I typically like to work with people who are financially challenged, and that could be anyone, right? When a lot of people are wanting to start businesses, they don't have the funds, they don't know how to get the funds or the money, or it's a side business and then they're trying to make it, be their main business. So I work with people that are financially challenged. I work with people who come from the African American community, the Latino community. I work with those that are from the indigenous community, Native American, pretty much anyone who feels disenfranchised from the bigger population. And again, that is to help with messaging. That's to help with language, and it's also to help where they lack, and a lot of people don't have broad marketing skills or public relations skills or the ability to overlap with things like taking pictures and then writing the copy that goes with the picture and then uploading the picture. Do you know what I mean? Like people can do one or two, or they'll try their hand at creating graphics and do what they can, but oftentimes they don't usually have marketing. And when I did research, a lot of marginalized communities lack that. And that's where I wanted to be there and to support them and to help them. And so you can't always charge thousands of dollars for that because the community can't afford that. So I try to make sure that I do pro bono work for nonprofits. I do help people who are trying to use this as a viable way to make money for their families. So I've worked with people at no cost. I've bartered with people, and then of course there's clientele and people that pay, and so it kind of balances out. So I just try to make sure that I can help anyone who's in need. I try not to say no, but sometimes you have to, and that's hard. That's a hard part.
And has the marginalized community always been your focus, or did you kind of grow into that over time?
I mean, honestly, I think that it just comes with the territory. Like, how do I show up as a woman who identifies as Black, African American? I have Native American roots as well. So how do you show up and not be a support factor for people who look like you and come from a group that you identify with? Like it to me would seem like a slap in the face, and it's very disrespectful, if you will. So I feel like I don't feel forced to do it, but I'm like, why wouldn't I? Like, it's a given, right? You help those that need help, but I wouldn't not help someone because they don't come from those groups. I just know that it can be difficult. I know what it's, I'll just lead with being a woman sitting in rooms where sometimes I'm the only woman. And when you sit there, when we talked earlier about fear can creep in and make you think you're not supposed to be in that room. But I never had that. I'm like, well, I'm supposed to be here, obviously, because I've got the skills, or, I've got the ability to sit in this space and own it. So I can't come in here fearful because they're going to use that against me. So I got to sit in this space and I got to be like, okay, I'm supposed to be here. So I try to help people to know how to show up for themselves. And that's another thing, like when you go, what makes us different? helping people to feel confident and good about showing up for themselves, for advocating for themselves. And that doesn't mean that you say no or turn down someone from another group. It's just to say you can show up more authentic in that space. And when we do that, then we can see each other for who we really are. So now I can help other people, and they don't have to look like me or be from my group, because I'm able to show up for myself. I don't have to make myself small, or I have to come in and only use that as my identifier. I'm an amazing entrepreneur who just happens to be a woman who happens to be Black.
Wow.
And I'm proud of that.
Wow. So can you talk about a successful campaign that you've managed, or in order to help a client?
I feel like every client that I've...
Check out today. Introducing Rada Burke Mills, serial social entrepreneur and brand evangelist.
That connectedness is bringing people together around the universe of how can you help the other business, as opposed to what can you get from the other business. You want to be in a realm or space where you are a giver, not a taker. If you are taking, it's going to be a short ride for you along that way. Our most successful businesses that I see in our area, and actually any area, are those businesses that are giving to the community more than what they're expecting and what they're getting from their community. If you're giving, it'll come back to you later on. You won't have to worry about it.
Hello everyone. For those of you who are new to my channel, welcome. And for those of you who are subscribed to Jay Speaks, thank you so much and welcome back. As you know, it is my mission, it is my passion to bring to you all conversation topics that are positive, motivational, educational, and informational. Today, ladies and gentlemen, I'm so proud, I'm so delighted to be here with David Bohm, Executive Director at Apex Chamber of Commerce. David is an upstanding gentleman, professional, and servant leader who is warm, caring, and kind-hearted. Not only does David have an exceptional ability to connect people, but also to ignite relationships and partnerships that lead to tangible opportunities that not only benefit individuals, but businesses as well. Whether you are a newcomer seeking a foothold in the Apex community, or an established business that's looking to expand your reach, David's support is invaluable. His network, which is rooted in authentic connections, demonstrates his desire to helping people thrive both professionally and personally. David is a true visionary who understands how to leverage relationships for the betterment of the entire community. Ladies and gentlemen, David doesn't just make introductions. No, David creates pathways for success, fostering a sense of collaboration that serves to uplift everyone around him. His unwavering generosity and his strategic insight make him an essential partner for anyone who's looking to grow in the North Carolina Triangle area. Ladies and gentlemen, please sit back, relax, and most importantly, listen. And hopefully after today's episode, you'll understand for yourself the why behind David's passion to wanting to serve and help others, and how he's executing that passion not only as the executive director at Apex Chamber of Commerce, but he has also made a difference in numerous local and national nonprofits, earning him myriad awards and respect along the way. So David, it's truly a pleasure to be here with you. I'm so excited that we were able to make this happen. How are you?
I'm doing great, John. Thank you for the opportunity and the chance to do this and engage, face to face and have this opportunity to share some ideas and thoughts.
Absolutely. I wouldn't miss it for the world. I'm truly so excited for this interview. I'm so excited to be here in person to speak with you. But before we get started, please, share with me, share with our audience, who is David Bohm?
Thank you. What a great first question. And welcome to the Peak of Good Living here in Apex. We're shooting this live in downtown Apex, having a great time, which I think feeds in well to my story. I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a volunteer, but also a servant leader. It's about what I can give back to my community. A lot of people say that. I like to not only say it, but live into it. Over a span of career where I've started off being born and raised in Kansas, knowing that I wasn't going to stay in that area, I picked on a map a place to go and move, and that was North Carolina, the best place to go and be. Now I've lived in North Carolina longer than my time spent in Kansas, so more than 25 years here. I'm starting off in the professional world as an attorney. That was a great career and starting point for me for 10 years. But as I was starting to raising a family and got married, I decided I needed to pivot and do something else that helped serve my heart and soul. So that's where the servant leadership came in. I started in the nonprofits, and that's led me down an incredible journey, being able to work from things like trade associations, academia, startup nonprofits, and now the Apex Chamber of Commerce, be able to give back to my community.
Wow, so curious, was North Carolina truly random? Like you just closed your eyes and put your finger on a map, or did you have family here?
Less random, no family, no connections, and the story behind that, as I was looking at law schools, I explored the entire Southeast. So I got in a car with my brothers one weekend, or actually a week. We took our spring break and drove from Kansas into Missouri and just did a loop, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and just made a big loop. And when I got to North Carolina, I said, this is it. This is the place. That was the mid to early 90s. And what I'll say, accidental choice that was made, because I was able to use that and grow those roots here. That has turned into a phenomenal success to help fill me with energy and passion as to what I can do.
So I guess when you moved to North Carolina, you've always lived in Apex.
So when I moved to North Carolina, I've been in a couple of different places. The first was New Bern. Lived there for 5 years there on the coast. Met my spouse, got married, and shortly after getting married, had a job opportunity in Charlotte, and that picked up stakes and moved her from the small community of New Bern to the big metropolis of Charlotte, to where we lived in Matthews and worked in Charlotte proper, and then had the opportunity to then come to Apex about 5 years after that. So of that time here, have lived coast, more or less to the west, and then back to the middle part of the state here in Raleigh, where I first started, which was my first adventure and putting my toe in the water of coming to North Carolina.
Wow, that's beautiful. 16 years, you said 16 years in North Carolina?
In Apex.
In Apex?
25 in North Carolina.
Wow, that's wonderful. That is wonderful. I truly like North Carolina myself. I'm from New York, so that's a big metropolitan school in DC, smaller metropolitan, but still pretty big. Houston, Texas, and I love North Carolina, so I definitely can relate to.
Well, going from the largest market area to, I think Houston is what, second largest or third largest?
You know better than I do.
It is well, you're going from large, just one step down, to then this area here. It's got to be a blessing to have a lot of the growth and opportunity, but also having the experience of not just being flooded with other extra people, being on top of each other. You get a chance to breathe a little.
Absolutely. Peace and tranquility. That is something that North Carolina definitely affords. Well, I do want to speak to you about something that you said in your answer, servitude, being a servant leader. Why do you believe that it's important to be a servant leader? And also, who or what inspired you to be a servant leader?
It's a wonderful question, John. It's the things that I looked about that charges my battery in the ways that I can help energize myself. I've done that throughout my career, and looking at the things that and looking introspectively, it's the things that when I'm serving others, I find myself getting energy and really kind of leaning in and being intentional of spending time in that space and area. So in my job opportunities, I've been looking at that servant leadership venue or avenue to be able to put my toe in the water, to get involved and engage somewhere, and then find that things that really are putting others before yourself. I think that's the way everybody should be living, and that's one sort of thing. If you're not putting others before yourself, I think you're just missing the point of why we're here on this earth and what we can do by impacting others. Because if you're not helping others, there's so many needs that are out here all around us, particularly where we sit, where even in Apex. People think of us as a very wealthy area, and there is wealth here, but there's also a lot of needs that can be served. And so who's going to do it? If you don't do it, if you don't do it, somebody's got to do it, right? Or should be doing it. And so that's where I like to lean in and step in and try to fill a void.
So what exactly gives you energy when it comes to servitude? Is it seeing the smile on someone's face? Is it seeing progress in a relationship or progress in an idea? Like, what gives you that energy?
The energy comes from, I'll say, an accomplishment. You're helping somebody, you're empowering, you might be equipping. You might see the light bulb going off in somebody's head just from an idea you shared with them. It may be easy for me, but somebody else hasn't thought about it. Maybe it is something that people are equipped to do a lot of different things. They just don't know maybe how to unleash their talents that are inside. So that's what gives me a lot of the energy, is kind of seeing that light bulb moment where that just sparks in them the accomplishment or the willingness to go forth and conquer, or to say, you know what, I can do this, and watch what's going to happen. Some people just need a little gentle nudge along the way.
So it seems like what gives you energy is when you can give people hope.
Giving them hope, and I'll say just sharing what I have learned and picked up along the way. John, you're a lot younger than I am, so when you get to this stage of life where you're on the other side of the hill and you got a shorter runway, it's about giving back to others. And others don't have to experience what you did or have to learn the hard way, but you could share with them in advance as more or less a shortcut to be able to not go through the school of hard knocks, but just say, hey, here's something that I found that worked very well and quite frankly has served the community as well.
So when, if you can recall, when did that spark for servitude happen? I mean, was it like, I mean, I'm sure it wasn't immediately outside of the room. Was there a specific moment, or I don't know, yeah,
I think it's always been there in the background for me, but it finally came to light into the service When I woke up one morning, the second child was about to be born, and me saying, I can't continue doing what I'm doing with a heavy heart. I'm not finding joy in the heart with what I'm doing. There's nothing wrong with being in the legal profession or having opportunities in that field. It just wasn't serving me in a way that brought a lot of joy and passion to me. So one day, with the second child due to be born any moment, was that kind of awakening of me to say, you know what, I can do something about this. And looking inside of myself to say, where can I turn? Where can I go? What can I do to help serve and bring what I feel inside of my heart to the forefront instead of suppressing it or to say, gosh, I wonder what that is. So that's what happened to me, and that was the transition that got me from for-profit into nonprofit, and the journey from Charlotte to the Apex area began 16 years ago.
So speak a little bit more about that transition. I'm sure that, you know, most of the time when it comes to transitions can be scary, the fear of the unknown, going from something that's stable, something that you're familiar with, something that you're comfortable with, something that you went to school for,
Yep.
you know, and transitioning into something that you might not be as comfortable or as knowledgeable in as the prior. So how was that transition?
It's scary.
It's scary.
It's scary. Let's be very blunt, let's be very candid. One of the things I was thinking about as you're asking that question, there's a lot of fear there, but I think I can describe myself as kind of the fearless optimist. You need to put yourself out there to find out what it is you can push yourself. What are you capable of doing? Anybody can sit on the couch and not do anything and wallow in a sea of sorrow and say, oh, woe is me. Versus, you know what? If there's change that can happen, if there's discontent in what you are doing or experiencing whether that's personally or in a career or in any other avenue or aspect of your life, what are you going to do to change it? And that's where the fearless optimist in me comes through and say, well, I don't know what this is going to be. I'm going to step off the cliff. We'll figure out something as we're falling down, and something that's going to happen in a positive way, and it always has. It's always worked out. Now, I wish I could say my career or life choices have all been like this. Haven't been anywhere near that. They're up, down, sideways, back and forth, left and right. But it's more of what can you do to learn along the way to put that fearless optimism into place and say, you know what, it's all good. We're going to get through this. And that's been, I'll say, maybe more scary for my spouse than it is for me, but I found out one way that I'm wired as that servant leader to say, it's going to be okay. You are in the right spot of where you're supposed to be at this point in time of your journey.
So you got a little pushback from your spouse during the transition?
We can't go there. No, I'm kidding, John. She is wired a little differently than I am. Mm-hmm. She's not the fearless optimist. There's a lot of caution, trepidation, and yes, and it was a huge pay cut, by the way, too, to switch that career from the for-profit field to the nonprofit field. But you know what? We find a way to make it. We're not living in a mansion, but we are more than comfortable in terms of our surroundings and settings and life choices too. That's another important thing I think you just pick up along life. What are the choices you're making? What is important? What is a priority? What do you value? And so that's where, again, my wiring as a servant leader kind of comes in. And yes, that causes friction, but we are certainly at a good stage, at a good point from that, as she has learned that everything is going to be okay, and it has been okay. It's been a terrific journey for both of us.
And I'm sure both of your personalities are valid. I mean,
Yeah.
valid in reasoning, and it's good to have that different perspective. So that's a good thing. So my question to you is, what was your first act of servitude after you've made your decision to follow through with that transition?
I would say being a person of faith, and I'm a person of faith, was getting more involved into my faith through our church. And so that was becoming a volunteer and really jumping in on service of the various work that they do, being a deacon for the church, also serving in different capacities and roles for them, to include fundraising efforts and doing a lot of things that are outside of my comfort zone, but again in that vein of saying it's going to be okay. Just go ahead and jump in. That led to an opportunity to serving on session, to being an opportunity to serve on the pastoral nominating committee, to serve or to choose our next leader for that entity. So it's been an incredible thing. That's kind of one thing is built from one to the other, and it helps spark where I can put that servant leadership into practice.
Do you still serve at the church to this day?
I do, but I will say some of that volunteerism has wound down as I've come full circle of that. I jumped in head first and did about 10 years of serving in that capacity, and now I'm serving in volunteers in other roles outside of the church as well.
Awesome.
So one thing that sparked there has obviously sparked out into the community of serving on nonprofit boards in a variety of contexts all over North Carolina, and in particular Wake County.
Wow, that's awesome. So it had a ripple effect.
It does. And goodness, throw that pebble in the water, cause those ripples to happen, right? You don't get ripples out there by, again, just sitting on the sidelines or just sitting back and saying, gosh, I wish John would throw that rock in the water. I've got to throw the rock in the water.
Wow.
Make those ripples happen.
Wow. So, relationships are one thing. Forming a relationship is fine and dandy, but keeping a relationship is what's difficult.
Yep.
I can speak on experience. I had multiple friendships, relationships, whatever you want to call it, while I was in college. The second I transitioned out of that space,
Yep.
lost a lot of them. So I'm sure there's many different factors as to why relationships can fall to the wayside.
Yeah.
So my question to you, someone who prides themselves on making strong relationships, what is your secret to long-lasting relationships and keeping that bond through the ebbs and flows of life and the turbulent storms that could have
Sure. I think it's about being genuine and being authentic, but on top of that, you got to be intentional in terms of what you do following up. It's one thing to have this engagement, have that interaction, and if you just disappear into the hinterlands and never think about that person or engage them in any way after that, you've kind of lost that possibility to have that genuine relationship or effective relationship that's with them. One thing that I've said in my role of serving now with the Apex Chamber of Commerce is you got to sign up, show up, but you got to follow up. And that follow-up is the glue that holds the first two together. You've got to do all three steps, but it's that third step of following up that shows that you care, that shows that you listen to the individual. By way of example, if you are not listening and you start the conversation where you were before or start over in that conversation, that sends a pretty strong signal to the other person. Gosh, I've already explained this to David once. Why is he asking the same questions again? So I think it's important also to be that active listener along the way to really cement, if you want that relationship to be out there and to exist. So sign up, show up, but follow up through intentionality.
So in your words, what makes a relationship genuine?
Oh, great question. You care. You actually care about the person who's sitting across from you having this conversation. That you are comfortable. You care, you have comfort, you can open up in terms of that genuineness. Are you going to put a false filter in front of you? Are you going to do the Instagram filter to have that on there? Are you getting the true individual that's in front of you? And are you comfortable enough with the individual to share who you really are? That's what I would describe it as.
Interesting. So why do you think that people lack being genuine?
because you want to be accepted as something else. And I say that from the standpoint of a lot of social media and a lot of social media posts that are out there. Is that truly how they are in their lives on the day-to-day interactions? I don't know, but I suspect some of it is just highlighting the pluses, not the negatives. So that genuineness, the authenticity, do you see the real or do you see the filtered view of that individual? That's just my thought.
Interesting. And do you feel as though it's easy for people to be genuine?
I think it is
Because
hard.
it's hard. Okay.
It is hard not to be genuine or to say, here is my real authentic self, to put yourself out there. We live in a society that values and honors the perfect. Do you know anybody who's perfect? Because I'm still trying to meet somebody who's perfect, because I am nowhere near perfect. And everybody I meet has some sort of flaws. Some may have more flaws than others, but none of us are perfect. But society really sets us up for that perfection, or that you have to be perceived as perfect. And I think that's not being genuine, because we're not perfect.
So what is your approach to conflict resolution and problem solving? From a relationship standpoint and also from a general sense.
Yeah.
Because everything is not perfect. You know, relationships do fall apart. Bonds do break, even if someone is genuine. You know, it takes two parties for that to happen. But I mean, from a executive director standpoint, you know, I'm sure that you handle a bunch of different problems on a day-to-day or on a week-to-week basis.
And there's a lot of things that happen, and going back to my legal background, I have an analytical mind. So my mind is very analytical, the way I process and try to solve and resolve items and issues. So to me, it's about what is the issue at hand, identifying what the preferred outcomes would be from each side, or each side of that transaction, or both sides of the coin, and then figuring out how do you get to some reasonable resolution of that item that may not be 100% on what one person wants, and it's not going to be 100% what the other person wants, but it isn't necessarily a 50-50 split right down the middle. So it's really having the opportunity to engage, ask the questions, and then just trying to figure out creatively through dialogue and conversation and discussion, can we resolve this or not? Or are you just going to be 100% obstinate and dug in and saying, this is where I stand, this is where I'm going to be, and I'm not budging? Well, there's not going to be much you can do to try to solve or resolve that sort of conflict. But I think if you approach it by being personal and upfront with individuals, I think you can at least get a sense for what the issues are, where the person's coming from. Having this conversation and identifying where they're coming from is sometimes very revealing to give you the action steps of where you can get a reasonable resolution.
So when you have to, I guess, not set a fire off, but cool down a fire, you notice you've noticed that party A is not listening to party B. What is that? There's a difference between listening and hearing?
Oh,
right?
Yes, it's called marriage.
I hear that too often.
You'll learn that when you hit that stage, but those folks who are married will appreciate that comment.
So you notice that when problems arise, one party is hearing the other but not listening, or responding, or what is it, listening to respond, or hearing to respond?
Yeah, I can't think of the exact scenario for that, but you have to be really engaged, active listening as opposed to passive listening is one way that I'm thinking about. Are you hearing them, or are you just looking to provide your response without actually processing what they're telling you? What cues are they giving you? Is it something that, can you de-escalate a situation that has a lot of tension in it? Because if you can de-escalate it, that is probably a better pathway to get you to a reasonable resolution. But if it's escalated up there at a level of 10 or 11 or 12, you're probably not going to get much in terms of a workable solution between the two parties.
So could you provide an example? Could you reflect on a time where you had to navigate a difficult situation or a difficult conversation with a community member or an organization and resolve that problem, resolve that conflict?
Yeah. Over the tenure of now 16 years in the nonprofit space, there's a lot of these things that pop up that I'll say are challenges and opportunities. One of which, whether you serve as an employee or a volunteer, I think one of those difficult times is it time to move on to another opportunity? Or whether that means a change in your role or position or looking at a different organization, or you've kind of lived out your life expectancy in terms of serving as a volunteer. Sometimes it's just better to part ways than it is to have somebody in an organization that maybe is bringing negative energy overall. So those are very difficult conversations that have had to happen over a span of that 16 years for me that are not comfortable for me to have. And it's not comfortable for me to engage in that dialogue because people, for a variety of reasons, love to be involved and engaged where they are, but they may not be providing a positive outcome overall to progress the organization to the next level. So who is going to be the person that engages in that dialogue to help remove that as an obstacle on the pathway to progress? So I will say those are very difficult situations and things that I don't enjoy, but they happen. But you can't get that growth without removing that sort of barrier to allow you the opportunity to experience the growth.
So it sounds like you had to deal with that situation multiple times, it sounds like. What path do most people tend to take? Do they tend to leave the organization, or do they tend to try to work it out?
They've done both. And yes, that's been over that experience of seeing it a multitude of times. And I would say if people, in my experience, if they would look at it from the viewpoint, which is hard to do when you're the person that's in that situation or experience that, look at it from the view of the organization. That's one of the things that as a leader, it's not about you, it's not about the individual, it's about the organization. So what is the things that you can put into place that can help advance the organization? So having those difficult conversations under that lens really changes the focus. But I will say too, let's flip the table, that I'm the one that's being spoken to. David, it's time for you to move on to another opportunity. Those are hard discussions to have when you're receiving that. And it's hard for you to be in those scenarios to see the viewpoint of the organization over your own personal interests. Well, hey, this is about me. This is about I don't need to change. The organization needs to change. You need to change. So you're usually met with a lot of resistance, and I will say disapproval, or maybe from the standpoint of saying, hey, that's not me. It's you that's the problem. But as an organization, those are the difficult conversations. It's usually the person that you're speaking to. So folks have done both ways, trying to work through it, but most of the times it's not a scenario where you're asking, you're really severing that relationship, again, to move on to something more positive overall for the organization.
So focusing a little bit more on you, you said when you have to, I guess, oversee these talks,
yeah.
It's very uncomfortable for you.
Yes.
How do you, I guess, get into that zone to work in an environment that's uncomfortable?
You have to put yourself in, just lean in. And again, unfortunately, I've had several of those conversations along the way and other scenarios where it's not comfortable for me, but you just have to lean in, think about what's good for the overall sense of the organization, and really just have that perspective. I've got to remove myself from it and the personal feelings that are out of it, because a lot of times these are very good people, very well intentioned. It's just not overall good for the health of the organization for the future. So I think it's, for me, I've just got to distance myself from that to look at the role you serve in as a leader. You're doing this for the organization, not for you individually and not for the board members. You're doing it for the organization as a whole.
Interesting.
So that's how I address it.
Okay, well, thank you. I want to change gears just slightly. Can you give an example of a community outreach or an engagement campaign that you successfully led?
Yes, that in nonprofit world that happens all the time. Whether you're reaching out in terms of fundraising, whether you're reaching out in terms of programs, whether you're reaching out to ask for input or feedback on projects that you're doing. One good example of that we just did, we did a survey for the Chamber of Commerce. We needed to reach into the community to see how are we serving, what are the needs, where can we be doing things better overall. And so that was one thing here in the very most recent past that we have just gone into. And you have to think about, John, I don't want just a random sample or just hope that people are going to respond to that. That was about us reaching into pockets and pools of the community, business community, overall community, members, non-members, and trying to get as much impact or much feedback as possible so we can help design a course that we can address going forward, that we can address what we see as the member needs based on the feedback we hear. I could just come up with a list of things and say, well, here's the needs of the community, or guess. Probably not a good way to approach things. You need to talk to the community you're trying to serve and get that feedback and then implement a plan on serving that out.
So how is it getting feedback? Do you feel as though when you try to get feedback, you're pulling teeth, or are people in the community, are they very giving of feedback?
It's a mixed bag.
I
wish it was very easy of just sending out, and I say, if it was easy, we would be getting feedback all the time. To get quality feedback, you got to be a little more intentional, and we actually engage the services of a nonprofit consulting company to help us with that by way of example. But I think you really need to be intentional in what you're trying to accomplish and then how you want to accomplish it. Point being that if I am going to rely on and have 20 respondents, is that enough? Can I just check the box and, well, we put out a survey and that's the feedback we got, shrug our shoulders and say, I guess that's the best we can do? Or are we going to help fuel the fire by reaching out, asking for these communities as a whole, or reaching in specifically, or me contacting you and directly to say, hey John, remember that survey link I sent you? Have you completed that yet? It won't take you won't take much time at all. We would love to have your participation because your voice needs to be heard. And so I think a lot of the things that we do in terms of reaching into the community is really on that basis. Are you checking the box? Are you actually getting enough of those responses to be able to provide the impact that you're desiring to make?
So it sounds like following up, which you were talking about, again.
Sign up, show up, but it's the follow-up. And this is in everything in life, and I wish I hadn't kind of figured that out much earlier in my nonprofit life. If you're just going to rely on folks who are very busy, get asked to do a lot of things, that intentionality usually gets them by following up, gets them to engage in what you're asking them to do. If you're going to be passive, good luck. You'll get a handful of folks that do, but to get true meaning and true feedback and to get true connection with your community, I think you need to have that intentionality step of following up to make sure X, Y, or Z has participated, or pockets of your business community have responded, or segments of your community are at the table voicing their opinions, are able to share that feedback with you.
So how do you follow up when it comes to getting feedback from the Apex community? Is it door to door? Is it flooding somebody with emails? Is it a phone call?
It's all the above.
All the above.
It's whatever you have the most time in your day to do. I'll say most of those touches are electronic, and I would say the more intentional that we need is going to be more the steps you're talking about of phone calls, or from emails to text to phone calls to then showing up in person. Showing up on the doorstep, I find, is a pretty effective way to get an answer one way or another. Are you going to participate or are you not going to participate?
So when it comes to a community outreach or an engagement campaign, how much time do you give yourself and your team as far as receiving that feedback before you say, okay, we've got 100 responses, okay, we got 200 responses? Is it like,
Yeah.
try to get as many responses in a week, try to get as many responses in a month? Like, what's that time frame?
It's a good cadence, and people do it in different ways, but I'll say I think the shorter the time period you can giving somebody 2 months to do things is too much. Giving people 2 days to do things is not enough. So it's that all the things of the porridge, this one's just right. It's probably about 2 weeks to a month. I would say no longer than a month if you're looking for survey feedback. Now, if you're just wanting more anecdotal feedback, the shorter the time period, the better.
Interesting. Well, oh, you had something to say?
I was going to say,
yeah, please.
it just really just depends on how much time and energy you have to devote to the activity and how important that activity is for your strategy to do impact in the community. By way of example, how important is that feedback, and do you have enough of it in? Really kind of sets the tone for, let's say you arbitrarily set 2 weeks and you don't have what you deem to be enough responses. So set another week. Be intentional. Make sure you have an action plan to reach out and engage the folks you're trying to hear from. Because if they didn't respond in the first 2 weeks by email, you probably need to do something else, do something different.
I mean, wouldn't you agree that whatever you and your team come up with as far as asking for feedback to the community is important? Like, how would you rank one survey over the other?
I think yes, and what I'm alluding to is it feedback on how you performed on an event versus doing more survey as to the impact or needs of the community. It's going to be something that takes a little bit longer and have a little bit more runway. Versus, do we do ice cream social this year versus an in-person networking event at town hall? Those sort of things. So prioritize, no different than what you need to do in life. Prioritize what is important, what are the values, versus what I would say is just busy work or just filling your time.
Absolutely. Well, in one of your in a previous answer, for this question, you mentioned how you work with a lot of different communities. So I want to ask you, how do you stay updated and informed on the various issues that happen in the communities that you work with?
Have you heard of the acronym ABC, Always Be Closing? So I would use the acronym ABL, Always Be Learning. So whether you're learning online, I like to subscribe to a lot of e-newsletters and things that arrive automatically in my inbox. That could be anything from a business publication, statewide or locally or regionally. So I like to stay engaged a lot that way. If I had the time and energy and able to participate in person, that's where I like to show up. That whole sign up, show up, follow up, that show up portion of it. Now in the role of serving in the chamber, you get invited to a lot of different things. I've been showing up at things and learning about my community of things that I didn't know were going on or that do occur or that happen, or the great work that people are already doing, but for the fact if I hadn't shown up, I wouldn't learn or know about it. So if I get an invitation to participate in something, chances are I'm going to say yes if I can squeeze it into my calendar to have the opportunity to show up, because that leads to wonderful conversations. That might be community related, that might be something about providing impact around the state, or somebody who's facing an issue and challenge. And perhaps in the last week, I've had a conversation with somebody who'd be a perfect fit to address what they're talking about. So I like to stay in tune I can't go to everything. I sure wish I could, but I can't. But to have these things on my calendar that not only feed into my regular work, but are outside of the scope of that work that might fuel or further grow my capacities or more my learning abilities as to what I can do to help be a servant leader in my community.
Wow. So do you require your team to also join you in these in-person events, or are you solo dolo?
To the extent that they had the time to do that, I like to encourage others to do that. Another one of my aspects of what I do, I teach at Campbell Law School.
I'm sorry?
I teach at Campbell Law School.
Oh,
So
wow.
given my legal background, I have been afforded the wonderful opportunity to teach students. And as Professor Bohm, I encourage my students to participate in a lot of these activities, to share with them my life lessons. So whether it's my team members who have limited amount of time on their plates, to the extent they can, I want to encourage them to do so. But everybody I encounter and engage with, I think if we're able to get out there in the community, have one-on-one conversations or part of a group conversation, or just learning about what's going on in your community, can help get the wheels a-turning and help you connect the dots. If you're not a dot connector, it's going to be kind of a tough road for you to figure out how to solve or resolve problems that are out there going on in your community.
So David, you sound like a busy man. You sound like you're very busy. If you're not working for the Chamber of Commerce, you're working with a nonprofit, you're teaching, you're going to events.
There's a few irons in the fire, that's for sure. But I am a person who's wired, part of that fearless optimism is also a wiring that I've got to be busy. I won't say that it pains me, but it is, if I'm just sitting on the couch not doing anything, I get pretty restless very quickly.
Wow. So do you burn out?
There is a chance to, I'll say, recharge that. I wish I could say that that is on constant 24 hours a day to have that level of energy. I will say I slow down and that battery hits the, the low, where it hits the red on your phone that it's going into.
20%, 10%.
Yes, a low
5%.
charge mode, that sort of thing. So by the end of the day, I'm pretty well spent, but able to recharge that battery and start it again at 5 o'clock the next day. I'm just a morning person.
Wow. Wow.
But, so getting started at 5 in the morning, whether that is with a spouse and I walking the dogs, we have a route that gets us an hour activity, or whether that's working out with a men's workout group called F3 at 5:30 in the morning. That's how I feel with my weekdays, and the weekends, my quiet time hours usually come between about 3 and 4 a.m. To then, but I'm not a night owl, that sort of thing.
Wow. Listening to your schedule, I'm honored that you made time in your busy schedule to even talk with me.
And as you can tell with the time of the day here, we won't reveal exactly what time it is. Yes, it's becoming evening here in downtown Apex, and so my battery is it's almost to hit that level to where it's saying, but I've still got some energy left in there. It's not dead, but it's certainly, by the end of the day, yes, you get to where that battery level, you need to rest and relax.
Absolutely.
But if I'm resting and relaxing for days on end, that's not good for me.
I can definitely relate to that. I'm a busybody myself. But I also want to talk a little bit more specific about the communities that you work with.
Yeah.
If you don't mind going into detail as far as like what communities do you work with, or the diverse communities that you work with, and what is your experience working with diverse communities as well? So
I will say it is an ever-growing opportunity for me, and the different varieties and levels of businesses that I've been with throughout my work career has grown exponentially in my opportunities to get into communities of all kinds. That could be communities and pockets within an actual town in terms of populations that are served. And that could be things that are centered around activities, sports activities, and that sort of thing. It could be things that could be youth related, and getting involved in something like the Y Guides program of the YMCA. So I've had that blessing, and that's where I like to show up and be active and participate in a lot of these things. Were it not for my kids, I probably wouldn't be involved with the YMCA and the Y Guides program, which works with youth and dads to put them together in monthly activities to where you spend one-on-one time with your child. Through that experience led to a leadership opportunity for the Y Guides program overall on an advisory board, And that sent us out into the community to scratch our heads to say, how do we increase racial diversity within the program itself? And so that got me on a whole different journey to intentionally put myself in the communities where I haven't been before, and to listen, hear, find ways to react to situations where we can engage different ethnic and racial backgrounds of individuals to get them assimilated into the programs so that they could have the wonderful experiences with their kids that I was experiencing, just by one example.
How has the progress been with that?
It's been amazing to transform that, and I'm very proud to say that growth continues to happen. I think they have, I'm not sure the exact percentages. I'm now a couple years removed from being on and active on that board, but I will say we were very instrumental of planting the seeds to have that transformation happen, to where we now have more racial diversity on that board, and even in the leadership pipeline, as the new leader of that is someone with a racial background. That is the first time that we've had somebody in the African American race serve in a leadership role for the Y Guides program, by way of example. The number and amount of dads and their children that are serving overall in the program is much more diverse than where we started with the program when I got involved 10 years ago. So very proud of that.
So you got involved 10 years ago, but when did the program start?
It is now more than 50 years in existence.
50 years, and they're just now getting diversity?
Yes. If that goes to show you anything, yes.
And it started after you joined?
The seeds and those wheels were in motion, but I will say were not exactly embraced overall by the overwhelming community. And I'll give a great example. The program was not very active in Durham, by way of example.
I'm sorry. Say that again, the program is not really active in...
Just to give an example, my experience was right here in the Triangle area, but more specifically in Raleigh. There was pockets of Raleigh where the program had not done a good job of intentionally showing up and engaging the communities to have them participate. It was more passive and reactive than intentionally inviting communities to come in. And with the very simple step of inviting communities to join you, guess what? We've been able to get those folks to engage as opposed to hoping that they will engage with the program, just by way of example.
Wow, and what's the age group of this program?
This is from first grade to third grade, and if you want, that's where the formalities of the program take root. You can actually, in a less formalistic way, continue with the program after that.
Interesting. Interesting. Any other program? Do you have any programs where you're working with majority women?
A lot of different varieties. I'm thinking in the business community, very important when you think about diversity and diversity across all different scales. Veterans, women-owned business, minority-owned businesses. But what are things even beyond that? We're starting some things now where we're trying to think creatively. What are just people interested in and passionate about, regardless of your gender, regardless of your race? How do we help bring communities together around an idea or an activity, but then on the backside of that, think about how are we getting into pockets of communities to make sure that everybody is well represented around the table.
How is it navigating those conversations? I feel as though conversations that deal with race, conversations that deal with gender equality, those are they can be tough conversations because people have their reservations as to why certain things are the way that they are. What is your experience working in those, or being in those tense rooms, having those difficult conversations? Is it easy for you to persuade people to forego their belief systems?
I will answer that by they're as difficult as you want to make them. And that from the standpoint, from people's perspectives, how dug in are you or resistant to hearing a different viewpoint? None of the conversations in that vein are easy. I will say we're going through this right now, just by way of example, at my church. It's a learning experience. It's not a one and done sort of conversation, and it's a journey. Where are you on that journey? In terms of you at the very beginning and being very resistant, or are you on the other side of that and very open and I'll say super accepting and saying that this is something I'm already in agreement with. So regardless of the topic, you're going to have folks on all sides of that spectrum, I think. And so I think it's important just to approach it by coming in. One, you got to talk about it. Secondly, find where everybody is, see where they are in terms of that sort of scale. And then, what are you trying to resolve? Where can you go? Is it informational? Are we trying to de-escalate fear? Are we trying to implement a program? And if so, what programs are you trying to implement? So there's a lot of different avenues and aspects. But I will say, I've yet to walk into one of those where it's comfortable for everybody in the room. And I think that's why you want to have that dialogue, have that conversation, is to throw it out there on the table and say, well, what is it that we're actually talking about or looking at or trying to resolve? And once you get folks in the room, you never know where the conversation is going to go.
Wow. Are those conversations that you enjoy having?
Personally, I'm not a person who enjoys conflict. So as a servant leader and being that fearless optimist, I try to find, I'm more of the people pleaser to try to find that resolution. So instead of us trying to sit here and do this, bump heads, I'm trying to find this. That's where I find my strength and my energies and where my time is spent. So it's not something I'm comfortable with, it's something that I sometimes have to do, but it's not something I prefer to do.
Yeah, I can definitely see why you have that stance. I also want to talk about the Apex Chamber of Commerce's mission.
Yeah.
To engage businesses, to improve the economic vitality and well-being of people in the community.
Yeah.
How have you seen your team live up to that, your team fulfill that? Has it been an easy ride? Has it been bumps in the roads?
I'll say for any nonprofit, very important to really stick to the mission, right? So once you have that mission in place, I would say every day is a journey on that ride too, of sticking to that mission, or are you going off the road and maybe into the ditch or into areas that's taking you away from that mission? It's not easy in terms of what you're faced with every day of tasks. Hey, I think we should be doing this. Well, let's back up and say, does that fit into the mission or not? Our service into the community, I find it's much more important to ask, what are your needs? Hence why we just did our survey. And what we learned from that is that our community is looking for connectedness. And so
looking for
connectedness, coming together around something. Now what is the around? Again, a subject matter, a certain purpose, or around support. It could be around education, it could be around advocacy, it could be about business-to-business connections, it could be about service in the community. And so we look at pathways and how we build into our mission, our pathways to bring people together around this, our four pillars of advocacy, education, connectedness, and then community.
Talk about the other pillars.
What's that?
Talk about the other pillars.
The other pillars? Yeah. So looking at the advocacy angle of it, what are you advocating for? What are the interests of your group? And of course, the business community is where that economic vitality and looking at the well-being and quality of life of your community comes in. So is that bringing in speakers? We look at things and bringing in speakers to talk about what we need to advocate for. Education, it's a wide open universe of programming that you can do to help serve the business needs. But that could also be professional development education. So always looking at ways that we can help people grow not only their business, but also as individuals. That connectedness is bringing people together around the universe of how can you help the other business as opposed to what can you get from the other business. You want to be in a realm or space where you are a giver, not a taker. If you are taking, it's going to be a short ride for you along that way. Our most successful businesses that I see in our area, and actually any area, are those businesses that are giving to the community more than what they're expecting and what they're getting from their community. If you're giving, it'll come back to you later on, and you won't have to worry about it. And then that last one of just community. What are we doing as businesses or individuals to help serve the community needs? So bringing and raising awareness to what those needs are, and finding out a way that the businesses through the chamber can respond to those needs. It could be a food pantry in our local high schools. We're doing that food drive right now to help our Western Wake Crisis Ministries, by way of example, to anything of a coat drive, backpack drive. There's many different needs and things that you can do, and we try to do our best to serve as many as we can.
Interesting. And the businesses have been receptive?
Very receptive to that. Matter of fact, we find that's where our bread and butter as an organization comes from. Our membership base are those that want to be engaged in the community. If you're looking for transactions, I'm not going to be the spot at the Chamber of Commerce that's going to serve you well, because transactions aren't what we do. We're all about relationships, building that relationships with leads to the growth of the business later on. But you've got to be that giver first to be able to get that return on the back end.
Interesting. And as with regards to businesses, talk a little bit more about the economic vitality. Like I said in the mission, to improve, to engage businesses to improve economic vitality and quality of life. What do you mean by economic vitality?
That is things of just kind of growth overall in the business, and that growth means different things to different businesses. So is that adding more employees, bringing in more revenue, opening up a different storefront, just getting things off the ground? The economic vitality is to hopefully that you are keeping those doors open month after month, as opposed to just going deeper and deeper into debt. Helping them to grow their ideas. Our tagline is building, connecting, and inspiring. So part of that economic vitality, how do we build your business? How do we connect you to resources that you may need, or get you connected in the community, and inspiring you to dream bigger? What does the economic vitality mean to you in your individual business, which is usually different for each business that you encounter?
So do you have one-on-ones, consultations with each businesses, or with each business? Or do you have like town halls where all the business leaders come, and then you have like these open discussions? How does that work?
We have both, but I will say the ones that really fuel my heart and passion, and where I get the most out of both sides of the engagement and interaction, are the one-on-ones. But there's only so many coffee meetings, lunch meetings, or opportunities to schedule that meeting come into play. So I do a lot of them, and if you follow me on LinkedIn, you can see where a lot of those conversations come into play. I'd love to take a picture of that and help promote who I'm talking to. And John, I don't mind saying that sometimes, or a lot of times, those are non-members of the chamber. To me, it's not about I can only serve the members. Yes, the members are very important, but I also see about the rising tide raises all ships that are there. So I look at this from the aspect of all ships, and hopefully they will end up being members later on further down the road. But if I can be of help now, let's start to spread that out, help rise that tide, and see where it can go from there.
Wow, so how many businesses are in Apex?
A lot.
You don't have a number?
There is no official, I'll say, set number. I will say from the chamber's perspective, we've got 430 plus members, several of whom just joined up today. But there are thousands of businesses. In other words, the growth potential and the opportunity to be a fully engaged community, a number in the thousands. And that's anything from a mom and pop store to an individual that has a side hobby that they've turned into a business, to a big major corporation that has moved into your area. So there's, when you talk about number of businesses, nobody keeps an accurate count of that, but it is in the thousands.
Wow, and that's a pretty good number as Apex grows. You were telling me earlier how you guys are going to be seeing big numbers as far as people moving into the community.
Big numbers of folks that are moving into this community. Just by way of example, they're estimating in the next 5 years that 50,000 more people will move into Apex. We're already at 80,000 people now, so if you look at that dynamic of just keeping to add that many folks, and what I will say is a very short amount of time period. I can't remember the exact number of the folks that were here back in 2008 when I landed in Apex, but it was nowhere near 80,000. It's probably near about 30 to 35,000. Just to give you an example, it just keeps doubling, and we're just going to see that wave of growth continue to come. We're blessed. We're blessed.
Absolutely. Well, what can the people within Apex look forward to as far as new beginnings in the future?
You're going to see a lot of growth. I'll just explain it as growth. And it's going to be growth not only from national franchises, but brand new businesses, small, brand new mom and pop shops. That's going to be everything from downtown Apex with more businesses moving in, but you're going to see more developments coming in. There's one that's just getting ready to unleash now. It's called Sweetwater. That is a mixed use with businesses on the bottom and living opportunities at the top that's centered around a town square. That's going to be a new economic hub for us, for neighborhoods to gather around. With this much growth coming to Apex, my vision and my view, you're going to have the downtown, it's going to be vital, but you don't want 80,000 people in downtown Apex all at once as the only place to go. We're going to find our success by having these neighborhood hubs where people can plug into. That might be in the Friendship area. That's going to be Viridia, which is a new online development that's just breaking ground now, that's going to bring 40,000 people between Apex and Holly Springs. It's going to infill. We're going to see a lot of that infill happen, but we're going to be centered around these little mini or micro hubs that are bringing people together in these spaces to have experiences, to live, work, and play, and that's going to be scattered throughout our area and region. We will still have Peak Fest, which brings everybody downtown. We will still have Pig Fest, which brings everybody downtown, but you're going to have more options than just those centered around an annual festival that brings the folks together. You're going to have nightlife options. You're going to have more retail shopping options. You're going to have all sorts of experiences to be sports related. Pickleball, go-karts, things of that nature coming here online soon. So watch what will happen.
So it sounds like all of this new improvement is bringing you joy.
It is, because you want to be on that growth side of things versus having the other problem, which is businesses closing or exiting your area. We are more than blessed with this tremendous amount of growth that we have and is still coming. You never want to take it for granted, but we have a variety of options that can serve many different needs, to be varieties of food, a variety of shopping, from high end to middle end to low end sort of opportunities for us to plug in and engage in many different ways.
What about the schools? I feel as though if there's going to be 50,000 people coming in to this community, are you guys looking to build more schools? Wake County is always looking to build more schools. There's a lot of things that are going on in that realm or in that aspect. So yes, that is coming to Apex. The development I mentioned, Viridia, is going to have its own elementary school in it. There's a development right now. I think there's 2 or 3 schools from elementary up to high school that are being built right now, but obviously as the growth continues to come, that is part of our growth strategy, is you got to add the education opportunities in there too. You got to, and try to keep the class sizes as small as possible. Manageable for sure, and as I said, we have been blessed with 2 new high schools, a 3rd one being built right now, and I say 2 new high schools, one that was torn down and just rebuilt. Apex Friendship is not that old, and we have another one that's coming online this fall. And you guys have teachers? Because I know I've been hearing that teachers have been quitting the game. Yes, I don't know the exact answer to that, above my pay grade, but I know that they certainly have the quality in the schools that we have now. But yes,
I will say statewide, a recruitment issue and keeping folks in those positions are something they continue to look at and explore. But again, I think we're pretty well blessed and fortunate to be in the area where we are, because people want to live here. People want to work here. People seek this out as an opportunity for them, or where they see growth potential in the future.
So I have a question. If someone was interested in being an executive director at a chamber of commerce, not necessarily Apex, but just in general, and work with nonprofits locally, some nationally, what advice would you give to that person?
Dream big, put yourself out there, and don't quit until it happens. That's been my mantra in terms of my opportunities that have come up. I'm the first generation to be a lawyer, by way of example.
Wow.
No one in my family, as a matter of fact, I've got 5 other siblings. All of us have had the blessing of going to college and pursuing career pathways that way, but we're all first generation students that are coming through. Neither one of our parents completed college. And in fact, one parent that doesn't do any college. So those sort of things of put yourself out there, because you never know you don't know what you can achieve until you put yourself out there. Show up to these things. In other words, if you see an opportunity that's of interest, find out what it takes to obtain whatever that item is. It could be extra education, a particular certification, number of years of experience. You got to figure out what it is to achieve that level of where you want to be or where you want to go, and then just backfill from there. And then I'll say lastly, don't give up. Follow through and don't take no for an answer. One of my favorite things to say is persistence pays off, because there's a lot of things in my life where people have said no initially, but I keep showing up. I keep showing what value I can add. I keep showing the interest I have in it, and that's led to my job opportunities over time. I did not go to school to be a chamber of commerce or a nonprofit leader or a servant leader or anything of that. I just find what finds joy in my heart, find a reason to show up, put myself in the pathway of opportunity, and don't let go of that opportunity until they say yes and put you in that seat.
Wow. So what is your advice to someone with regards to not giving up? Because it's so easy to give up. It's so easy to throw. It's so easy to throw in the towel, especially when you have been rejected multiple times. You've heard no's multiple times. What can you share with somebody who struggles with that? Whenever it gets hard, they just clam up and...
Yeah. The easy thing to do is to not pursue it anymore, right? The easy thing is to be stuck. The easy thing is to do nothing. So you got to be that fearless optimist and put yourself out there. You're going to hear no more often than you're going to hear yes. I learned that as a fundraiser. You're not going to be successful 100% of the time. You're not going to be successful 50% of the time. You'll be lucky to be successful 10% of the time in the fundraising game. But if you let those no's bring you down, then you might be in the wrong role, or that may not be the thing for you. But if there is something that you are passionate about and you want to make happen, there are no limits. You just have to accept that and rewire in your mind that it is possible. You have the potential. You just have to unleash the potential to put yourself out there and follow through. And as I said, sometimes I equate myself to the dog that's chasing the car. Every once in a while, you're going to catch that bumper. And you better be ready for when you catch the bumper. What are you going to do at that point? And I like to say that that's been very much a blessing in terms of my career, because I shouldn't be where I am in my spot, in my role, because I did not come through a career pathway to put me into those roles. Well, what I've done is leverage my education and opportunities to advance into these roles, but I don't have a background in running a chamber of commerce, but I have a background in nonprofits. I have a background dealing with conflict and looking at fundraising and doing the operations. And anybody can step into those roles and do it if you put your mind and body and efforts and intentionality into it.
Awesome. I totally agree. Thank you. Well, before we officially end this interview, I just want to say, do you have any lasting comments, any lasting words that you want to say to the camera, to me, to the viewers, anything?
Yes, whatever it is that you choose to do, go into it with intentionality and don't let up, don't give up until you got your result that you have set out to achieve. And also just dream big. Dream big. Why not think about things that you can put you into a different stratosphere, or to say, whatever it is that you want to achieve, why not dream big? You may not hit it, but I know you'll miss it 100% of the time if you don't at least put it out there from that opportunity and try. Guess what? I've had a lot of failures in life. You see I'll say the wins that I've had, and you can see that on my resume. You know, I'm posting the wins. But there's a lot of losses that happen across life. Just be intentional. Don't give up. Put yourself into the position for success. Equip yourself for that, and just don't give up. Don't take no for an answer. Persistence pays off.
Persistence pays off. Well, David, it's truly been a pleasure. I'm so glad that we were able to have this interview. I'm so glad that I was able to speak to you face to face and meet you. I truly wish the best for the Apex Chamber of Commerce and your team, and all that you will accomplish, all the people that you will impact. And I just hope that it's a smooth journey, a smooth ride. And if it's not, having you as the executive director, I'm sure you'll lead the way. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, John. I appreciate it. Thank you for what you do to give people the opportunity to share information, share their stories, and hopefully people really latch onto this idea. You are equipping people with a lot of different items that can make a difference and impact in our world. So I thank you for what you do to help bring this to fruition, because otherwise I have not had this outlet or opportunity, or the opportunity to share the stories, and then my pleasure to do so.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Brother.
That was good.